Hello and welcome to the April 24th edition of This Week in South Carolina in Session. I'm Gavin Jackson outside the State House here in Columbia. Well, it was a very quick day, this first day of the last third week. Hello and welcome to the April 24th edition of This Week in South Carolina in Session. I'm Gavin Jackson outside the State House here in Columbia. Well, it was a quick Tuesday up here at the State House with both the House and Senate getting out within about 90 minutes of being in session or thereabout. Again, they have about 8 working days left up here until May 10th, which is the last day of session. So every day kind of counts up here. And we did see some movement actually in the House on a major piece of legislation that now heads to the governor's desk, and that is S805. You might remember when we talked about this in March. It's Senator Katrina Shealy's bill that creates a child advocacy oversight position and agency in the government, in the South Carolina government. Basically, any agency that works with a child, whether it's Department of Social Services, Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Health and Environmental Control, any variety of agencies in the state of South Carolina that interact with children. This position would oversee, and any complaints, any investigations, any situations would be taken to this oversight agency for investigation. So this bill now heads to the governor's desk, and it was a pretty big move for the Lexington Republican Senator Katrina Shealy. We actually have some comments from her earlier when we sat down with her in March, so we can play those for you in a little bit. Also, not too much activity over in the Senate today. We did see both the House and Senate actually honor the Richland County Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Leon Lott and his deputies that are actually prominently featured on the TV show Live PD, which you might have seen on the A&E network. So we have some photos, some video rather, of all those deputies being honored over in the Senate as well. But like I said, it was a quick day, so let's just get right on into it right now, dealing with that the House passing S805, that bill that creates that child advocacy position in the state government. Here we go.
DSS had a history of having kids in their care abused. Are you familiar with that?
I have heard some and read some in the news about those cases. Yes, sir.
How would this bill help in terms of curtailing the abusive or kids under DSS control in foster homes, or when they're in homes that they take them out of the house, and I can name several issues or several incidents that occur where kids were not only physically abused but neglected while they were in DSS care. So how would this bill would wrestle with the issues of making sure that all of our kids are cared for and living in a safe environment?
Thank you for that question. Here's what it does: is it sets up an agency that is independent from DSS to investigate those complaints. Can they stop every single one? Probably not. At least, though, there would be a place to go to have an independent investigation by somebody with subpoena power who can require them to show up and explain why this child is where the child is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates the Department of Children's Advocacy. In general, this new agency will protect children by looking at case-by-case issues and systemic problems. If there's a fatality or near fatality of a child, the agency that's linked to the child, the one who's providing care, would have 24 hours to report that to the child advocate. The advocate would then investigate it. So we're creating an entity that can do an independent investigation when we have a bad outcome for a child who's in the state's care. The duties of the child advocate would also be to study the statewide care of children and come up with a comprehensive plan for all of the state agencies that deal with children. So it gets jurisdiction over the following agencies: DSS, the Department of Health and Human Services, DHEC, the John Dilla House School for Deaf and Blind, the Department of Mental Health, DJJ, the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, and the Will Lou Gray Center. All of those would come under the jurisdiction, would be subject to investigation by this new children's advocate.
We know that in the past that children haven't been being protected. You don't have child deaths. We just had another one the other week in Richland County. You know, we need to start protecting children in South Carolina. We need to make sure that they're, you know, whether it's HHS or that they're being fed, whether it's DJJ and they're not being protected there. You know, we have problems at the Department of Juvenile Justice. Whatever the problem is, This bill is going to help with bringing it all together and be an oversight over those agencies. No, it's not an enforcement agency. It's, they're not going to go out and, be an enforcement agency, but it's giving people a place where they've not had it in the past, where they can go to if there is an issue. This is going to give, it's going to be an agency that we're going to make people aware that they can go there. So we're not growing government. People are worried about, oh, you're creating an agency, you're growing government. We're not. We're actually consolidating 2 positions into 1. We're using staff that's already there. So we're not growing government. We're not increasing the general fund. We're using funds that are already there.
Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott and his deputies were honored by the House and Senate today for their work in the community and on Live PD, a show that broadcasts police officers from across the country responding to calls live. The Sheriff's Department was one of 6 on the show on the A&E network when it first aired in 2016, 1 night a week. Now Richland County is still on the show, which runs 2 nights a week. So yeah, that was very cool to see all those guys out there today. I know a lot of the senators were fans, and they actually had a moment there to meet and greet with those guys on the Senate floor rather today. So pretty big moment for that. And that kind of wraps up our day here. It was pretty quick, like I said. Again, there are 8 days left until May 10th, which is Sine Die, which is the last day of session. So a lot needs to happen, and we are expecting some action tomorrow or later this week on the House floor dealing with a major piece of legislation that we talked about last week and that we've kind of been waiting for the entire legislative session here, and that's with dealing with the lowering of SCNG customers' rates, specifically that 18% nuclear surcharge that customers pay every month in their bills to the failed VC Summer nuclear project. Remember this project? Yes, we've been talking about it for months now because it's been about a year since it came to light, and it's been the main focus of the legislative session this year. But basically right now, the Senate proposal that is in the House, the bill S954, the Senate proposal says they want to lower those rates by 13%. So not the full 18% as the House had proposed, but 13%. So customers would still be paying 5% of their bills every month if the House adopts this measure. Now this 13% because lawmakers in the Senate believe it might be unconstitutional to remove the 18% entirely, and they have a commission study that shows that SCNG and SCANA, which is the company that owns SCNG, can financially withstand the lowering of that rate to 13%. So that's a pretty main justification for them there, and that's really what helped get it out of the Senate in the first place. However, there's a curveball because Governor Henry McMaster said he wants 0%. He wants the entire 18% removed, or he will veto the bill. Now, we kind of heard some tough language from the House as well, but there have been some reports that they might be going along with the 13% rate reduction that the Senate has proposed, because right now, House lawmakers either concur with the Senate proposal, or they send it back and insist upon their proposal, which would set up a conference committee, which could get messy. However, it could still be done. They could still go into extra innings in a sense, which is extra session. But I think a lot of them want to have something they can take home to their constituents, especially during this election season with the June 12th primaries right around the corner, and say that they did something when it came to the SCNG debacle, which is still ongoing. This is just one piece of the legislative puzzle that lawmakers are trying to put together this year. But if they do agree with the Senate amendments, then they will send that bill right along to the governor, who at that point would have to veto it, insisting that he wanted 0% rates on that legislation. So it would then obviously go back to the House and Senate, which would easily be able to overturn that veto. So it would be an interesting dilemma right there, but I think the governor has stayed true to his message. I don't think he's going to budge on that. I don't think he'll compromise, but if the House and Senate are willing, rather, to overturn that veto, so be it. But we'll be seeing that. We'll see how that develops. Again, nothing's concrete at this point. We did see the House lawmakers really get out of the House today early. That's because Republicans had their caucus meeting today, and I was told last week that a lot will come out during that meeting, and we'll get some better idea about what their move is next. Also, we're still waiting to see the House take up the budget. They still need to take up the Senate version of the budget, which was passed back to them days ago. Likely they won't concur with it, obviously, then it sends it back to the Senate. Eventually they'll come together with a conference committee, and those people will develop a compromise budget that will then be sent to the governor. That needs to be formed as well. so stay tuned for more developments on that. And stay with SCE TV throughout the remainder of the 2018 legislative session as we continue to bring you live updates every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, live at 7 p.m. on SCE TV's Facebook page, our YouTube page, and my Twitter account at Gavin Jackson. You can also find out what's going on up here at the State House on the SCE TV Daybook, and that's on scetv.org. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we provide you with an update about what's going on up here at the State House, as well as the top news headlines from around the state. And you can follow us on South Carolina Public Radio, where we provide you with the latest news every day. And State House Week every Friday with Russ McKinney. It's a legislative roundup every Friday that airs on South Carolina Public Radio. And you can listen to the South Carolina Lead podcast, which drops every Tuesday, and that's when I talk with reporters who cover the top stories up here at the State House. And we go behind the headlines to get some more context and insight in those top stories, as well as some campaign news and some news from across the state that you might have forgotten about. I'm Gavin Jackson here at the State House in Columbia.